Everyone, welcome back to the Digital Health Digest series for 2025. Had such a great year recording last year with all of our amazing guests. This year, kicking things off strong with Jorge Palacios. Hi, Jorge, how are you?
Hey Ellis, how's it going?
Yeah, very good. It feels weird to call you Jorge because I've always called you George, but
I know, yes. It sounded very weird when you said it, yeah.
How this is going to work is I'm just going to give an introduction to yourself, but please do let me know if I get anything wrong or if you want to add anything in. We've already chatted about the topics that we're going to be speaking about today, some really interesting ones to share with our audience. So excited to get started. But for those of you that don't know George, he drives the research and scientific strategy for Bright Therapeutics. Bright has developed some world-class digital therapeutic solutions in areas such as eating, substance use, and depression and anxiety disorders. You're doing really impactful and important work, George, but your journey didn't start with Bright. It started long before that. You did your medical training and PhD at King's College London in psychological medicine, and then joined SilverCloud Health, where you were really instrumental in helping shape and lead the research and implementation of digital interventions. And on a personal note, and I have actually been witness to this, you're a true advocate for digital therapeutic solutions, speaking at conferences globally, and your work has been featured in top academic journals. And if I remember a fun fact about you, George, you've been on a podcast with one of the Love Island casts. So hopefully I can successfully follow on from that.
Very good. Very well remembered. I have, yeah. So that's my claim to fame now. I should just put that on all my bios. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it was one of the
Write them
first
in.
things you ever said to me. So
Well, I think it just happened, and what was interesting there is that it was an interview where I interviewed him and then a professor from a university, but they were both equally insightful, and it's just kind of made me understand throughout the years how we can get insights from so many people. They don't have to be experts. They don't have to be, mental health or clinicians or and just, people who know about mental health either by living it or working with it. So yeah, it was great. And it's also a good conversation starter. So that's probably.
yeah, no, well, it was, yeah, for sure.
But can I
Um,
correct one thing from your intro though?
Go for it.
I did do my medical training in Mexico, not at King's.
Oh,
That's right.
sorry, you did,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
did. I
No, but
remember.
it's important to mention because it's one of the reasons why I think cultural adaptations are so important in digital health as well
Mhm.
to increase access and reach. So yeah, I'm almost glad you missed it, so I could say
Yeah,
I'm
sorry about that, my mistake.
yeah.
But I know we're going to be talking about some of that later on. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I'm sure there'll be lots more you can share there. I want to kick things off strong because it's right in your wheelhouse,
Mhm.
and it's quite a loaded question. But it's been a hot topic really over the last year, and whether it's needed within health tech, and how it impacts investment landscapes, etc. So, in your view, what does effective evidence generation look like in health tech?
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean, it's a great kickoff question because, as you say, lots of people talk about it and most people don't really know where to start. And that's okay. I mean, I understand that most people don't have an academic background when they venture into the digital health space. And it's also true that in academia, evidence is usually seen through this linear pathway, right, where the RCT is the gold standard. And I learned that. Obviously, I learned that when I was within academia, and that's what I believed. And then in my early years at SilverCloud, and with this depression and anxiety platform, we wrote about it, and we actually wrote a chapter on this, how evidence shouldn't be linear. Like you can do all sorts of different types of trials with different methodologies, and some not as robust than others, and you can do them in parallel, and they all feed into the evidence of your product, right? So
Yeah,
that's certainly true. And I'm talking about pilots of feasibility studies and RCTs, et cetera. They will all give you important insights, and the data that you get from those trials will give you also really important insights. But then another thing I've learned recently, and I advocate for, and I've actually spoken about this in conferences, which is great because that means that people are open to listening to it, is that evidence doesn't have to come from peer-reviewed publications or RB published studies. And even though, like as an academic and a medic, that I know there's my father, my grandfather would hate that I say this, but not everything has to be through the, scientific method. And what I mean by this is that evidence can come from simple things such as just even reviews of your app on the App Store, or
Yeah,
surveys that you did, or someone sending an email to support saying, "Hey, I love your product, but this particular tool doesn't work for me," or I've been using it for many years. Like that's real world evidence about people who need your product, using your product, and then using it in many different ways. And I think that's really important in digital because like apps and products have so much packed into them, so much, and
yeah,
a lot of studies really are about perhaps one treatment type or one condition or one group. But a digital therapeutic, once it's out there, once it's in the real world, it'll be used by like thousands of people, if you're lucky, millions of people. And they
yeah.
all are different with different needs, or they might use it for different things. And so it's impossible to have one trial and then generalize it across all of your users. Like that won't work. So evidence has to come from everywhere. So yeah, that's kind of like a summary of it. You have to treat all of the data and all of the insights that you get equally as important. You may not be publishing it or speaking about it in an academic conference, but that doesn't mean you can't speak about it, or your audience will be different, depending on where you disseminate it. It's all relevant because it'll all help to improve your solution.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because I've never actually thought about like, App Store reviews or stuff like that being used as real world evidence, but it is.
Yeah.
Have you seen any ways that have been successfully used, whether that's at Bright or, in other companies where it's been used to improve the product in a more efficient or quicker way?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, like going back to app reviews, they're very interesting, right? Because they're usually like if I told you the average person who would leave a review on the App Store, it's usually someone who wants to complain about it because
Yeah.
they download it based on what it said it did, and then for whatever reason it didn't, and so they need to tell someone, right? So either they
Hmm.
might call customer service or send an email, strongly worded email, or leave a negative review. Like that happens a lot. Um, Now we're very proud because we have a 4.9 rating on the App Store, meaning people are going out of their way to leave positive reviews. So that's great, but that doesn't mean we don't have negative reviews or positive reviews that have a caveat of saying, "Hey, this particular function in the app didn't work for me." And so the thing is, you have to address those immediately, right? Like even in a small company like ours, we look at those reviews, or we see the general consensus and we say, okay, there seems to be a problem in this particular area of the app, right? Like people are logging in, maybe it's showing a glitch, or it's not functioning for them well for them, or temporarily something's down, and that's how you find out about it. So you shouldn't ignore it because it can always tell you things about your app that works. And then on the other hand, positive things, right? Like even this month, I went on to see the latest reviews, and someone said that they had been using it for 3 to 4 years. Like you cannot get that from a trial because you won't be able to follow up people for 3 or 4 years. People talk about long-term engagement, and that's 6 to 12 months. And here is someone, again, going out of their way, a real user saying that they've used this for their condition for 3 to 4 years. That's amazing. And
Yeah.
that's, again, I won't be able to publish that in a peer-reviewed publication, but that tells us something about our app, that there's a stickiness to it, no? And then another review said about motivation and said that, for the first time they thought that they weren't going to relapse in their substance use. And so again, that talks about evidence behind the app being, improving accountability and motivation for users who really want to use it. And studies publish on this. They do it and they interview people and they do it in sophisticated ways. That's great, but you shouldn't ignore these comments because it tells you things about your product that might otherwise take months to find out. No?
Absolutely. But interestingly, though, it's it would be good to understand how many of those app reviews are actually then converted into actionable points within the business. Because what we've found, and we've actually been part of this process with some of our customers, is that many companies are investing heavily in expert teams who can make the most beautiful UX UI design and deliver the best customer experience from that perspective. But actually sometimes the patient cares more about basic functionality and just ensures that the clinical outcomes are right for them and improves their condition or whatever they're dealing with. So how do you balance the need for innovation and beautiful sort of engaging design with the core user needs?
Yeah, well, I mean, I would say that it's quite imbalanced right now. I would say that there's way too much time spent on making a product prettier or making it have, a function that just adds, some color or, bells and whistles to the app instead of really concerning themselves with what patients and users, because I'm going to say users because clinicians as well, how does it make their life easier, right? And I've seen not only in publications in the scientific literature, but from experience that users tend to be more simplistic in their needs. Like no one downloads an app for their eating disorder because it looks good. Like they'll download it because it works. It provides the content that they need and it gives them a motivation to use it day in and day out. And so I do fear that too much is being wasted on that. And I know like waste is a difficult word to say in tech because no one wants to think that their job is wasteful or it's fine to to spend time on this and to make it as nicely looking as possible, but you have to think, who are you making these changes for, and actually do they have an impact? Like I think that's a very important question to ask yourself. Like, if I do all of this content and design, like, is this actually going to have an impact on outcomes, on usability, but also on my business? Whereas if you focus a little bit more on outcomes and stickiness and engagement, maybe that will have a stronger impact.
100%. I think sometimes it's forgotten that it's health tech, not tech health. And sometimes the health can come as a secondary to the technology behind it, which is why we may have seen some companies fail, because it's just been more geared towards a tech company than it has actually been focused on the clinical outcomes and the patient journey. But keeping on the same topic of competing stakeholder needs, and something that we've discussed is the disconnect between what the investors want, which, let's face it, is ROI, and what healthcare buyers need, which is the clinical outcomes, as we discussed there. How do we balance the investor piece in this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very difficult question to answer. Of course, ROI is difficult, and it's difficult to prove because the pressure is so strong from investors and customers as well. If you're B2B, I mean, customers will want ROI as well. And they don't care if you say, hey, like, wait 3 or 4 years. Like, they want to see it now. They're making bets all the time and want to see dividends on those bets, and that's fine. But it makes ROI very, very difficult because it is usually a long-term dividend. Whereas improvement in clinical outcomes, you can see almost right away, right? So I think one important thing is to understand where the costs are coming from and how you're going to counterbalance them by building something that people will use. But to understand that, you need to, I mean, to actually do that, you really need to understand what it's going to be used for. Like, whose problems are you solving and how are you going to best solve that problem? Like, focus on that, because as soon as you do that, I think sometimes what people don't understand is that ROI comes secondary after you focus on something that isn't immediately measurable through ROI, So if you if you get someone to engage and ultimately improve outcomes, clinical outcomes, or just satisfaction or whatever, or maybe clinicians love it so much that they stay on and they don't go to a different clinic, and therefore you're not spending money on rehiring and things like that. There's also these secondary outcomes that can bring ROI back, but at some point, like, there is this kind of belief like we're going to go all in on this implementation before we get our ROI. And we've been asked the ROI question so much, and sometimes it's just like, well, I can't give you that answer. I can't tell you right now if your ROI is going to be 3 or 4 times, right? Like I can give you a number, but I also need to understand what you're spending money on and what parts of that expenditure can we counterbalance through this
Mm.
technology. So like I can just hear myself speak and just, say, look, it's incredibly complex and difficult.
Yeah.
Right? But there's all of these considerations that I think that the more of these you put in, the better chance you will have at showing ROI, because yeah, there's all this other stuff to concern ourselves with, which is the regulatory frameworks, and the reimbursement codes, etc. If you're in
Yeah.
the US, especially. So, there's a lot that can go into it. But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question
Yeah, no, it does.
or not, but like, yeah, basically you have to think of a lot of different things, and not
Yeah.
even as simple as some people make it out to be.
No, and that kind of leads me on nicely to my next question, because like you said, there's so many different elements that come into this, and a
Mhm.
lot of companies are very focused at the beginning phase. And we have customers that come to us and say, we've built this amazing product, we spent loads of time in R&D, we've launched the product, but we're not seeing the commercial traction or the results that we expected. And why not? It's mainly because that they didn't realize that product launches are just the start of the journey. There's a lot more that comes after that. And they are now experiencing pressure from their investors, bringing it back to the investor piece, because they're not having the results. So, how do companies then adapt, maintain that user trust, commercialize in a sustainable way? What comes after that launch phase?
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean it's a great question because it's super important. And well, I mean the short answer is a lot comes after. Like it definitely
Yeah.
isn't just the beginning. I mean it's ideally you want to work with partners and customers that really believe in your product, right? They're not just like ticking a box, but they really believe your product can be transformative for their organization. Because um, after the initial implementation, or like say you're training some clinicians in the use of your product, there's going to be all of these, it's an iterative process. There's going to be all of these questions that come after, or like, different user types, or like the KPIs in the company might change, or they might adapt based on the results that they're seeing with your app. So there's a lot of things that start to happen after implementation, and that's a
Mhm.
long-term thing. And so ideally, your customer will adapt to those, but then you have to adapt with it. And it may be that both of you together, through this continuous partnership, realize that there's an additional tool that you can put into your digital solution, platform, app, whatever, that solves an issue that you discovered thanks to the implementation of the app. So,
Mhm.
we've done that. We've done that with a couple of customers where, they've said, hey, what about having a summary of the data delivered in a very simple way to clinicians, just to see if their patients are doing better? Something in general terms like that. And we built that out for them and we implemented it. And then they created a KPI based on that tool alone. And so there's, again, a back and forth there that has allowed our tool to evolve alongside this partner, but also, for us, it means that this partner is in it for the long term with us, and engagement has improved, and outcomes have improvement, and it kind of all starts to fall in line. We've also had situations where a large health partner has changed their clinical guidelines, and we must then implement those into our app. So it's
Yeah.
always like keeping an ear to the ground and seeing what this partner is doing, because it's not just like to appease them because they bought your product. It's because it actually improves your product.
Yeah.
And then when you go to the next customer, you can say, we had all of these learnings and now you get to benefit from them,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Because now our product is even better. Like, I think it's very naive uh, to say that you are selling the best version of your product. That will never happen. Like, it's like I like to say, it's all about the journey, and the journey means that you'll never really, really reach your destination. It'll always be some something to improve. But that's, that's something to take advantage of, no?
For sure. And just out of interest on the partnerships piece, and you said that you need to partner with somebody who really believes that your product is going to be transformative to their product. How are there, I know it's a bit of a loaded question because I'm sure you have to go through many discovery sort of sessions with them to make sure they're the correct partner for you. But I sometimes see in this industry that lots of the clients that I work with are partnered with other clients that I work with, and it seems they're all partnered together. And sometimes it feels like, are they partnered for the sake of partnering and just showing on their website that they are partners? How do you know somebody is a good partner for you? Are there certain questions that are like standout questions to assess that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think one thing you look out for is that are they being more inquisitive because they really believe in improving their business, or are they just, again, just ticking some boxes so that they can just say that they chose an innovative solution, and then they're like going to turn around and get on to the next thing to brag about,
Yeah.
like I think it's good that they're demanding a lot from your product, and I think it's good that they're invested. If it's hard, like just even reaching them for a conversation, it's because they really don't care that much, and you can
Mhm.
see like that almost right away. There has to be a lot of transparency as well. And yeah, there may be some bumps along the road, obviously, because everyone's interested in, well, everyone's got their own interests, and always difficult conversations around budget season and things like that, no? And there can be some incredible champions on board, but then in the end they just can't make it work because of something else, no? So
Yeah.
it's not easy, but I think it's worth deciding that for yourself. Like, I think it's worth investing the time in figuring out, is this a right partner for us? Because you will invest a lot of time to build that partnership. And again, it can pay dividends down the line. So who is going to be your initial champion? We have been lucky, like in all of our products, the first big customer we've had has been like this one of a kind champion for us that has just like been so naturally uh, involved in the whole process, in talking about it, speaking about it, helping to disseminate it, and like no one's worried about who's taking credit for it. It's like it's just we are doing the right thing here for our patients, well, for their patients and via our product. So yeah, I mean, it's great when it happens, though.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like you've got a good one there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, cool. Well, I'm going to finish off as I always do. What are your predictions for now that we're in January? What are the predictions for this year for the digital health landscape and beyond that, if you can see into the future?
Yeah. I mean, I love the fact that you asked this question from everybody. I think it's a great tactic. By the way, I saw your LinkedIn post. This is your 2-year work anniversary, so this is like your anniversary podcast.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes, so I have to make it a good one. Um, and I don't know if I'll be able to. The thing is, with predictions, they always never come true, do they?
yeah.
But look, I think there's a couple of things I can say that they're kind of general, but I think let's see where they lead. So there's definitely going to be a lot of noise, like a lot of noise.
Mm,
It's going to be, I think, harder and harder to find the signals because there's a lot of investment coming into the tech space, as it always has been. But now the big thing is AI and machine learning and LLMs, and there's just a lot around that that is just worrisome in terms of the speed that it's going, right? And it's going to be hard for people to identify what are the solutions that work for them because there's just going to be a lot of them.
choice.
That's always been a problem, but I think now more than ever. And look, I mean, I come from an academic background and now I'm in industry, but I can still say that academia moves too slow and industry moves often too fast. And
Mm,
that doesn't bode well for anyone, right? Because for the end users, I mean, and the patients, because the studies that are incredibly sophisticated and well thought out by experts who have been working at this for years, sometimes never see the light of day, or they move so slow that just, the technology has overtaken them. And then the things that do see the light of day, because they've gotten like a 20 million investment for it, are sometimes done by people who don't really have the clinical expertise or really don't understand the patients or the end users. So I think that's a shame, and I know this is not a prediction, but it's kind of like a warning of sorts. But it is a prediction in the sense that I have no doubt that it's going to be difficult to find the signals amidst all the noise. I just think we have to be very focused on, what really is happening in the trenches and what really matters.
Yeah.
I can't predict where we are heading tech-wise because it's moving at a breakneck speed. I just hope that patients can get all of the benefits they need without all of the, all of the, I don't know, all of the negatives, right? Like the principles of do no harm that I studied when I was a medical student. I just really hope they maintain. So it's yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound too negative, but I mean, you talk to me about predictions. It's
it's hard.
It's hard, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of putting you on the spot a little bit there, but
I mean, I can't say, at least from my corner, sorry to cut you off, but just from my corner of this tech universe, I can predict that the opportunities will continue a lot because, again, like it's to really understand what customers need, you really have to work closely with them. And the companies that are, spending millions on developing these tools, like that's what they're focused on right now. So cool, that's great. But health and medicine happens still in the office space with the clinician and the patient mostly, right? And those are the problems we need to be solving still, so technology is meant to support that traditional situation. Yes, sometimes it can be virtual, and sometimes, apps are doing great to help. Like that's what I'm working on, but they're still supporting the clinician, like the human clinician, like that's not going away. So opportunities will still come for many, many different types of organizations. So I guess that's a prediction, but in terms of where the field will end up, I mean, it's very hard to say, but that's why it's exciting because it's really young, and there's a lot we don't know, but that's why I do like working here.
Yeah, I think most people in the health tech industry like being in this industry because it's unpredictable. So let's see.
So that's why your question is like just awful.
Well, thanks for giving it your best shot anyway. As always, it's been lovely to catch up with you. And if anybody has any sort of questions for Jorge, please do reach out to him directly on LinkedIn. I'm sure he won't mind.
Yeah, no, not at all. I love it actually. It's my favorite part of my job. These collaborations and these ideations and brainstorms with people in the industry. So yeah, for sure, reach out.
Lovely. All right. Well, thank you so much for sitting down with me, as always. Great to chat. And speak soon.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.